say stick it to the federal government. You know how many wolves we have in Utah at last count? Anybody know what the wolf population is in Utah? Much less than 100.
20.
Less than 20. Zero.
Especially in North Dakota.
Yeah, in North Dakota. We have 0 wolves in Utah. But the wolf is an endangered species and protected by the federal government. So by saying if a wolf comes into Utah, we're going to kill it, is saying we are, sticking our thumb in the eye or of the federal government. There's no reason behind that. It's just like the gun bill. There's no gun rights behind the gun bill. It's about sticking it to the federal government. The wolf bill is the same thing. There are no wolves in Utah. We want to stick it to the federal government. There's a resolution. There are a few resolutions working their way through. One of them says it's a resolution saying the federal government should not do anything illegal. The federal government is overreaching. You know what? I believe in states' rights. I believe the states have a proper role in the federal system, and the government should not overreach. But the irony of this is, these arguments were prevalent during the 8 years that President Clinton was president of the United States. Did you hear anything about states' rights from 2000 to 2008? No. But in that time, we had the Patriot Act. We had the bailout of Wall Street. One of the most expansive eras of government control during the Bush administration, much more than we saw during President Clinton and the 13 months that President Obama's been in. You saw a great expansion of the federal government during the 8 Bush years, and nobody complained about that. So I'm disappointed with these 13 bills that are doing nothing but sticking it to the federal government, because I think they're reckless. Now, what I've said to them, what I've said in debates and in the Senate on this is, I believe in states' rights. I believe that there are cases when the federal government's gone too far and the states need to push back. And I will be there to push back against the federal government when it's appropriate. But to simply say the federal government has no role in our lives is reckless. Because there are things that we need the federal government for. And I stood up and I've asked them, do you know that if Senator Dayton is successful in her provoking a lawsuit against the federal government, and this lawsuit prevails, which it won't. Our own legislative attorneys tell us that we have a greater than 80% chance of that lawsuit failing. And on a side note, in a year where we're cutting budgets, they're funding a $2 million lawsuit that our own legal counsel says we're going to lose. I think that's irresponsible. But with in this climate, if her philosophy is correct, that the federal government has no role in our lives, then you know what? The federal government will not be able to war on drugs. Over. We will not be able to. The federal government will not be able to fight a war on drugs. Toyota vehicles that are being recalled because of safety. Did you know that that's something the federal government is doing based on the same justification that we regulate the Endangered Species Act? So does she believe that the federal government has no role in regulating Toyota vehicles and recalling Toyota vehicles? Does the federal government have no role in toy safety for children or regulating pharmaceuticals, in the Space Administration, in national highways, in providing a smart electrical grid? Now you think back when the highways were built in the 1950s. You know that was a federal program that we needed the federal government to do it. If it was left up to the states, you would have had a good highway, a bad highway, a good highway, and a bad highway, and it wouldn't have developed in the way that it did. And because of the federal highway program, we have commerce in the United States developed, and it caused an economic boom for the nation because of the way that the states were able to then interrelate and intertrade, and we would have commerce between the states. We're talking today about an energy grid similar to the federal highway program, that we have a developed smart energy grid across the country. Now, Utah is a state that is energy rich. We have a lot of energy that we can export. And if we get this nationwide energy grid, the state of Utah will benefit economically. Does Senator Dayton believe that the federal government has no role in developing an energy grid? Because I guarantee there are energy producers in other states who can't compete with Utah and don't want that energy grid. And so if it's left up to the states, this smart, economically, environmentally sound development is not going to happen. So I think that's disappointing. I think it's reckless. I think the motivation of this is in an election year where they've identified the #1 issue for them to campaign on, for a party who has no message, no proposals on healthcare, no proposals on the environment, on global warming. The only thing they have to campaign against is to stir up emotional reaction to Barack Obama. And they're doing that by undermining the federal government, undermining some things that are very important for our society. And I, quite frankly, think that is reckless and irresponsible. So that's a little forceful, but so there are very positive things happening in the legislature. There's some things I've also been disappointed by, but you know, as a legislator who represents Salt Lake City, I want to convey to you that I don't believe that it's just the people who live in Salt Lake City that I represent. I was elected to represent the entire state, but I have a particular affinity for those of you in Davis County, and you guys in Weber County aren't bad either. So. Any questions that I can answer? Yeah.
I read in the paper that the legislature is thinking about using eminent domain to claim all federal lands in Utah.
Yeah.
That is one of the most innately stupid ideas.
And illegal.
And illegal.
Yeah.
So I just wonder where these people are getting off the boat.
You know, it's another one that's going to be a lawsuit. It's going to be expensive, and do they really think that our education system is adequately funded, that we have pennies to spend on, or millions to spend on a lawsuit?
How many of these are the governor going to sign?
That's a good question. I can tell you this: if it were Governor Huntsman, those bills would be getting traction, because he would be Huntsman threatened the veto, and Herbert's not. Herbert's letting the legislature run the show, and I think that's disappointing. You know, the governor, whether he signs them or not, and on the gun bill, I think he said he may or may not sign it. I think you need a governor who steps up and is a little more forceful.
I was talking to somebody about the gun bill, and I said, if it goes through, you can have a machine gun that can shoot 6,000 rounds a minute and use it for deer hunting in Utah.
Yeah. You know, the funny thing about the gun bill is there's a direct corollary that the Republicans don't like to talk about. There was a case brought in California in 2005 where it's Rake v. Gonzalez, where Mr. Rake was accused of illegal possession of drugs. And he argued that because the drugs were grown and sold exclusively within the state of California, that the federal government had no authority to regulate his growth and sale of marijuana. Now that is exactly what's happened when Senator Davis is saying the manufacture and sale of a gun in Utah is exempt from federal regulation. So I've asked
him. He lost that case.
And he lost that case.
Because I was in California at the time.
What big manufacturer do we have in Utah that's making guns?
Well, I said today that we do have Browning here, and I said, look, do you want the good citizens of Utah to go to federal prison? Like, we know this is a loser. And are you telling people, how are you going to feel when somebody goes to prison based on the bill that you've passed, encouraging them to make and sell guns in Utah, when we know it's against federal law? Just like the man in California who grew and sold marijuana went to prison. Margaret, how are you going to feel when someone goes to prison because you've told them it's legal in Utah when you know it's not?
I want to ask you a question about this collection of signatures by electronic means. Now, I've been out working for the Third Alvarez thing, and what do you think of the chances that that's going to be an obstacle to collecting those signatures?
You know, I think, and I've talked to the Fair Boundaries folks, and I've talked to the Ethics Initiative folks. I think they're going to bring a lawsuit to challenge the ruling of the Lieutenant Governor. And what they've told me they're going to do, and I agree wholeheartedly, is they should continue to gather those electronic signatures, because one of two things is going to happen. They're going to win the lawsuit, and those signatures are going to be permissible. And there's a chance of that. I'd say maybe 50-50 at this point. But let's say they lose the lawsuit. If they lose the lawsuit and they have 10,000 signatures online, you know what they also have? They have the address and phone number and email address of the person. So it means they can then email and call that person and say, your signature doesn't count, please come to our office and sign it. So it's a great way for them to gather signatures.